Welcome back to Otaku Daikun. Dai here. Today's the day we finally complete our dive into the first Tsukihime Remake. After experiencing Ciel's tragic normal ending, all that's left to do is cover the absolutely insane grand finale that is her true ending. What happens when you take your two strongest female characters, give them all new powers, and pit them up against each other? Well, we're about to find out. To recap the events leading up to this, we found out for sure that Shiki is becoming Roa's host. Ciel first tried to kill him, but couldn't bring herself to harm the boy she loves. Noelle, in her new form as a dead apostle, refused to let them go, fighting to the bitter end, never truly being able to measure up to Ciel even as a vampire. Arcueid watches all of this and realizes she could solve this whole Roa problem by making Shiki her minion. As Arcueid's servant, Shiki would have the strength to control Roa, but that still meant enduring life as a vampire, something he absolutely refuses, especially if it means not returning Ciel's mortality. Arcueid pinned Shiki to the ground, begging him to reconsider, but he won't comply. In the normal ending, Shiki rejected Arcueid by comparing her to an evil vampire like Roa. This time round, Shiki admits that he can't possibly hate her. In a lapse of momentary relief, Arcueid's neck shows off a faint death line. Even if he cares about Arcueid, he can't agree to this join me or die arrangement, so he uses this chance to slice her throat and escape. Meanwhile, Ciel can sense something's wrong and rushes back to Shiki by sprinting across the rooftops. This ominous feeling of hers was so new, so threatening, that she didn't even have time to fetch the 7th Holy Scripture from its hiding place. As she runs, she wonders what the hell Mario's doing. It's his job to take care of Arcueid, but she doesn't know that he got his ass beat last night. Mamma mia! Clearly, leaving Shiki alone with Arcueid still out there was a bad call. Just as the park can be seen in the distance, Ciel is attacked by a different threat. It's that goddamn spider ghoul again, though this is the first time we see it in this route. It fires its spines at her, making it clear she can't avoid this opponent. In just 1 minute, the fight is over. Putting aside all ethics and hesitation, Ciel utterly destroyed the spider. Riddled with holes from her black keys, the spider's body rots away, exploding into segmented pieces. While it had the restorative traits of a vampire, it couldn't possibly out-endure Ciel's immortality. That said, what the hell was it? Ciel's never encountered such a creature. It'd take more than your average vampire bite to warp a person that much. She wonders if Roa was experimenting with the fusion of humans and animals. With no time to confirm, she prioritizes Shiki and continues her dash to reach him. That damn spider delayed Ciel, such that she's not around to interrupt Arcueid's twisted retaliation. Much like before, Shiki gets away and watches as Arcueid curses him. Blood spills from her neck onto the park concrete, forming a larger pool than before. His knife may have slit her throat, but it's her heart that hurts the most. Conflicted emotions stir within her. Her sincere love for Shiki turns to rage as she confronts his rejection. Lifting her face from the ground, Arcueid reveals her madness, putting aside reason to seek revenge. Without Ciel to stop her, Arcueid's pool of blood swirls and starts to consume the world around her. This is one of her abilities as a true ancestor, event storage. As a nature spirit, the planet's sense of touch, Arcueid begins to lock away this texture of reality into her own separate dimension. The city disappears into the void of her blood as she struggles to support her own weight. Again and again, her hands slip, causing her body to dip into the blood repeatedly. Watching this, Shiki is paralyzed with fear. He knows he cannot escape, and instead waits for an inevitable confrontation. Ciel finally arrives, too late to stop Arcueid from activating event storage. Instead, she calls out to Shiki and tells him to run. She responds to his hesitation by simply grabbing him and leaping up atop the nearest building. As they flee Arcueid's domain, Ciel scolds Shiki for leaving her room, not wanting to hear any excuses. From behind them, towering pillars begin to emerge. Within this space she stored away, Arcueid is conjuring the Millennium Castle Brunstad. The rising walls come so abruptly that Ciel has to leap off of them to avoid a collision. Getting away from the castle, Shiki and Ciel reach the school as their only safe haven. There, Shiki begins to hear Roa's voice inside his head. Roa explains that since the school grounds were his former lair, the campus is surrounded by a barrier that's preventing it from being consumed by event storage. He claims the rest of the city is being swallowed up and transformed into a metaphysical environment. His barrier will only last for so long. Conversing mentally with Roa is painful, but Shiki chooses not to tell Ciel about it. Instead, he asks her if she knows what's going on. She words it quite nicely. Arcueid has stored the texture of the real world somewhere within her, leaving behind only the hollow outline of the city. Ciel suspects that once the castle is fully complete, restoring the city Arcueid stored may no longer be possible. The only living beings who escaped the storage were Shiki, who Arcueid wanted to isolate, and Ciel, who protected herself within a barrier. Thus, it's up to the two of them to defeat Arcueid and return the world to normal. Ciel wants Shiki to hide inside the school building, but he insists on taking responsibility for Arcueid's actions. He's sure that once Arcueid settles down, they won't have to fight, but Ciel reasons it's far too late for that. In this state, Arcueid won't stop until he's dead. He considers sacrificing himself to save the city, but Ciel strongly asserts that this isn't his fault. It was only a matter of time before Arcueid went crazy from bloodlust. Since Roa's power derives from Arcueid's, Ciel admits that fighting Arcueid was always an inevitable hurdle if they wanted to suppress him. Retreating further into the school, Ciel tries to have Shiki stay behind so she can fight. They argue about this until she once again brings up her invincible body. If he really wants to make her happy, then he can't afford to die here. Instead, he should trust his senpai, a seasoned expert in vampire hunting. Similar to her normal ending, Ciel puts aside her own fear and begs him to, just once, let her be the protector. Otherwise, she won't be able to genuinely smile. With her eyes tearing up, she declares she wasn't able to find anything useful at the church. They had means of killing Roa, but nothing about saving his victims. She feels selfish that all she can do is stay with Shiki, continuing to suppress Roa as long as possible without a long-term solution. Sad to see her cry, Shiki pulls Ciel in for a hug. He declares himself to be the selfish one. If anything, Ciel hunting Roa is what brought them together in the first place. It's his fault that instead of just killing Roa, they're looking for a less frustrating option. Shiki agrees to let Ciel handle Arcueid while he handles Roa. Neither of them have given up, and this compromise brings Ciel some relief. Shiki goes in for a kiss, but is still rejected since she wants to focus on the fight to come. They can kiss after the fight. Unlike the normal route, though, Ciel claims to have an ace up her sleeve, a legit method of taking Arcueid down. All she needs Shiki to do is remain himself till she gets back. They go into this battle a lot more confident than before, with Shiki trusting her abilities. On the way out, Ciel stops to make a promise with him to redo their previous attempt to hang out in the city with Arihiko. With a smile, she heads out to protect Shiki, but only after telling him that if he absolutely has to leave the school because of danger, he should flee to the gym or athletic field. Ciel runs through this fake city, a shadow of its former self. Discarding her church clothes, she reveals her battle dress from before. She doesn't have any civilians she needs to protect, so she can go all out. Thankfully, in this route, she still has the 7th Holy Scripture, unharmed by Arcueid's event storage. This Ciel is fully equipped, actually standing a chance. She speaks to the scripture, calling it 7 and ordering it to reconfigure itself. I've mentioned this already, but Ciel has modified the 7th Holy Scripture over the years to accommodate various forms. We've seen it as a pile bunker, 2 guns, a serrated sword, and sometimes a combination of these forms. This time, it takes the shape of a giant bow, loaded with shots not based around denying reincarnation, but rather the angels of the New Testament. Ciel leaps to a vantage point overlooking the park, about 500 meters away. Arcueid is still recovering, with her back exposed. This is the ideal time to strike, but failure could wind up making things worse. Arcueid receives her power from the planet itself, but only enough to protect her from any given threat. That means whenever an attack fails to kill her, she receives more power to respond to other attacks on that same level. As such, Ciel cannot miss, or she'll have to follow up with an even stronger offensive. While she's never put this method into practice, it's something she learned by reading previous battle records against true ancestors. Among these records was a vague warning to leave the vessel empty. She can only speculate what that means moving forward. The time for contemplation ends as Arcueid finishes her regeneration. Ciel estimates that the planet made Arcueid just strong enough to overpower her and the scripture. Thus, if she responds and succeeds with an even greater power, victory should be attainable. While she's immortal, she considers potential consequences that are worse than death. Her only reason to face this threat is because she can't sit by and idly watch as Arcueid devours Shiki. It's ironic how Ciel started her journey fighting for the chance to die, but now she's fighting for a chance to live. Her moment to strike comes when the seventh holy scripture finishes transforming into her bow. Each form is themed around a different cause of death, and this latest configuration is known as condemnation death. Firing its arrows must be done manually, or Arcueid will detect it. In fact, looking at her more than once directly is enough to alert her. Thus, after a single glimpse less than a second long, Ciel closes her eyes and aims based on intuition. Aiming isn't the only issue, though. This may be a bow, but its output is more like a ballista. Made by the root of a sacred tree, it drains the mana of its user, leaving them to figure out how much energy to put into the shot and how much to use on their own body to stabilize the devastating blast. Giving Emiya a run for his money, Ciel lets the arrow fly. In a blaze of luminescent glory, the shot fires out across the sky, between the buildings, and directly at Arcueid's head. It strikes, a crush to the head meant to rob Arcueid of her consciousness. From the very start, Ciel intended to fire a second arrow immediately after, one to destroy Arcueid's body before she could regain her thoughts. Sadly, this was a miscalculation. Arcueid can fight back even without being conscious. Thus, in the brief gap between arrows, Arcueid leaps up into the air and covers the entire 500-meter distance with ease. Just before she can strike Ciel, the second arrow is fired at point-blank range. It connects, but not as intended, sending Arcueid flying. However, what should have killed her only wound up repelling her attack. Ciel is exhausted from expending nearly all of her mana. Weak and no longer able to use her bow, she has no choice but to rely on other configurations. She readies a combination of her rifle and pile bunker while watching Arcueid stand up without any sign of damage. Regardless, she refuses to give up. The battle has only just begun, and with the scripture still intact, Ciel still has more to offer. Within her weapon is the extracted idea blood from Vlav. It has yet to mature as an actual ability she can use, but it is capable of refilling her mana. This buys her the time and energy needed to access the other three principles she acquired from defeating Dead Apostle ancestors. Chanting Set, Code, Galgalim, she powers up her body and jumps from her vantage point to confront Arcueid directly. Vlav's blood is enough to power her like this for the next 3 minutes. For a moment, we get a glimpse into Arcueid's thoughts during the event we just saw. While recovering in her vortex of blood, her hatred for Roa and desire for Shiki oppose each other. By using event storage for her own personal gain, she has forgotten her code as a true ancestor. Acting on her own emotions, the pain of being rejected, she's strangely behaving more like a human would. If only she were left alone, this wouldn't have happened, but now that it has, she's actually happy. Her pain distorts into pleasure, enjoying these newfound emotions. When Shiki rejected her, she felt as though he rejected her in this enlightened state, as though being told to return to her previous self as a tool for the planet. Eventually, her hatred for Roa bleeds into her affection for Shiki, confusing the two in a fit of rage. To avoid this confusion, Arcueid decides to suspend conscious thought altogether, conveniently as Ciel's arrow comes crashing down upon her head. The exchange is lightning fast. Upon being struck, the unconscious vampire leaps at Ciel, enduring a second shot that blasts her back into the pavement below. The arrows have returned Arcueid to her senses, acknowledging that a disgusting pest has invaded the world she created just for her and Shiki. The boy she's after is at the school, just a 2-minute walk away. But before she can proceed, Ciel must die. Meanwhile, Shiki is still waiting inside the school. He trusts Ciel to protect him, but at the same time, he just as easily wants to protect her. Stubbornly, he figures there's gotta be something he can do to help, and starts sprinting up the stairs. He recalls his childhood, when Aoko told him that one day he'd have a need for these mystic eyes. Figuring that time is now, he reaches the school's rooftop. His eyes, now enhanced as a vampire, are able to witness Ciel firing off both of her arrows in rapid succession. He watches as Ciel continues the fight, opening fire on Arcueid with her rifle. Undeterred, Arcueid steps forward without a care, heading straight on toward Shiki. Treating Ciel like an annoying bug, Arcueid repels all of Ciel's efforts with a single swing of her claws. Roa then decides to chime in from inside Shiki's mind, going so far as to praise Ciel for pushing Arcueid to respond to her. As Ciel's attacks are continually swatted down, Roa says it's a miracle. Shiki, on the other hand, sees how hard she's struggling. What the hell is Roa talking about? Roa responds by telling him to look up at the sky. Sure enough, a linear trail of stars looms over the battlefield. On the front lines, we see Ciel giving it her all to slow Arcueid down. The assault rifle, Blaze, sprays Arcueid with bullets, but none of them harm her due to the distorted gravity caused by concentrated mana around her. She doesn't even have to try to avoid them, focusing instead on leisurely walking to the school. Taking another approach, Ciel unleashes a blast of lightning magecraft, but not even a 2 million volt thunderstorm can so much as scratch her enemy. Instead, with each step Arcueid takes, the world she's created begins to grow lush plant life in her wake. The vacant city starts to get swallowed up by what seems to be the earth in a more primitive state, as though her powers as a nature spirit are simply leaking out of her body. Arcueid is so strong at this point that she doesn't even need to lift so much as a finger to push Ciel back with a blast of concentrated energy. The planet is pulling out all the stops to ensure that none of Ciel's attacks land. Arcueid merely taunts Ciel to try harder, knowing her body's reached its limit. Sure enough, Ciel can only keep fighting as her body constantly breaks and repairs itself. Since her spells and bullets won't work, she whips out the scripture's sword form. While the sword is definitely more powerful, it has a limited range. Using the blade's segments as a whip, she strikes from a distance, but it's still not enough to bypass the distortion around Arcueid. Instead, the region retaliates, countering Ciel's attack with what seems like sharp winds. This means Ciel's gonna have to get even closer. She reinforces her body with more mana and repeatedly strikes from within the vortex, but Arcueid's automatic countermeasures still outmatch her. Her efforts seem useless, but these attacks are managing to slow Arcueid down, if only a little. Responding to this, Arcueid finally raises her arm to strike. Only 400 meters away, Arcueid can now hit the school from a distance. She brings down her claws, launching a blinding streak of energy down the street. Ciel swings her sword in an effort to deflect the blast, barely managing to keep the school intact. Her body screams out, forced to keep fighting in an injured state because she knows she can't possibly let Arcueid take another step. Sadly, Arcueid herself is still in great condition. She actually enjoys admiring Ciel's techniques and continues to swipe her claws repeatedly, each time sending another surge of light. With the school right behind her, Ciel cannot afford to back down and continues forcing her tattered body to repel each wave with another slash of her sword. After 5 waves, Ciel actually learns how to parry the attack consistently, overcoming sheer power with technique. This delays Arcueid past her initial 2-minute time frame, causing her to admit that she's now bored. Ciel agrees, wanting to bring this fight to an end. Condescendingly, Arcueid wonders if Ciel still has some kind of secret weapon. Rather, Ciel declares that she'll have Arcueid kill herself. While Arcueid focused on the ground, she failed to realize what was developing up above. The stars in the night sky shape themselves into a curved blade. Now that a total of 3 minutes have passed, Ciel can now launch her next assault. These aren't literally stars, but rather points of a magical reflector that make up her technique, Idea Blood Beze, Calvaria Galgalim. These points light up and then fire down a curtain of light that strikes the earth like a guillotine. As a reflector, it responds to Arcueid's own power, using it to press her into the solid ground she created herself. Truly, Arcueid is being crushed from both sides by her own strength. Ciel devised this technique after defeating her sword tutor, the dead apostle Beze, and utilizing his Idea Blood. Screaming in pain, Arcueid struggles to oppose the light by pushing against the earth with her bare hands. She endures, even as the ground beneath her splits like a fault line. One half of the mass flows up while the other falls down, crimping Arcueid between them. Genuinely afraid, she begs to be spared, but Ciel does not relent, aiming to squash Arcueid like a bug. In just 3 minutes, the tables had completely turned, and it seems Arcueid is finally defeated by the sheer mass of her own world, no less. Ciel is now completely drained of energy. Even so, she cannot rest, and sluggishly makes her way to the school, delighted by her victory. She can reunite with Shiki, and the city should return to normal. The Millennium Castle that was growing suddenly shatters into tiny particles. Rather than vanishing, however, these particles gather into a single point. A gigantic sphere of light forms in the city, and despite its massive size, energy continues to gather, far exceeding any pre-recorded density of mana. It's universal inflation, similar to the Big Bang at the start of the universe. In disbelief, Ciel watches as this light takes on a human form, a giant, luminous body, indicating Nasu might have had a hard-on for Evangelion. Ciel, someone who worships God as a member of the church, is awestruck by what appears to be a divine being right in front of her. She can't fight that. Rather, it's the kind of presence one should prostrate before, not oppose. Terrified and exhausted, she can do nothing but stand and fret as light gathers around her, forming a large hand. It picks her up and starts to squeeze her between its thumb and fingers. The white giant is hot to the touch, searing Ciel's skin in addition to the pressure. Standing tall, Arcueid is reborn in this body of light, declaring this was exactly why she told Ciel to stop. Okay, hold up. Why is Arcueid suddenly pulling this OP stuff when in her own route, she technically got killed by Roa? The easy and most likely answer is that it's cool, but the idea given to us is that true ancestor royalty can wind up like this if their bodies are completely destroyed while still being full of concentrated mana. Luminous body, also referred to as rapid expansion or inflation, is what happens when that compressed mana is released. With no body to contain it, the energy expands with Arcueid's consciousness as the core. Thus, it only looks like her because it's projecting her mental image of herself. Sadly, this isn't just a means of resurrection, but also revenge. Should humans manage to kill one of the planet's various nature spirits, Luminous Body acts as a revenge mechanism whereby the released mana ravages human civilization as a calamity. Normally, a true ancestor is only able to access enough energy to be one step more powerful than their opponent, but in Luminous form, they have no such limit. Recall what the church documents warned about emptying the vessel? When Arcueid died in her own route, it was because Roa claimed the last of her energy, which was then given back when Shiki killed Roa. At the time she died, she was empty, avoiding this catastrophe. Because Arcueid was killed in this route with energy despair, lingering emotions, and unrestrained bloodlust, she's come back as a luminous giant. Earlier, she was less afraid of dying and more afraid of instigating this calamity. We get to see this transformation occur a second time from Shiki's perspective. He too thought Ciel won the fight. He could sense something wrong, though, when his heart began to pound, the same pressure incurred by Roa's presence. Resisting the urge to vomit, Shiki watches as light gathers. Roa knows what's happening and explains it to Shiki internally. He clarifies he's not trying to take over the body, but rather he had to react to such dire circumstances. Arcueid's surging energy jolted him awake. At this point, it's actually better for Shiki and Roa to cooperate. If Shiki hopes to save Ciel, it seems there isn't much choice, given how much Roa knows about what's happening. Hilariously, though, Roa finds himself overestimating Shiki's intelligence and has to dumb down his explanations. They start planning what to do, considering that Ciel can't die, and he'll just be killed again and again by Arcueid. The instant he realizes this, Shiki sprints into action, ignoring his fears to try and save her. In this, Roa serves as a voice of reason, offering advice so Shiki doesn't just dive in and get killed. That said, Shiki's not about to take that from a guy who's already died 16 times. Stepping out of the barrier around the school, he's glad he has a vampiric body that can withstand the turbulent, atmospheric pressure Arcueid is causing just by existing. The size of the city isn't as it was in reality. It should only take Shiki a minute to reach Arcueid by judging the distance visually, but after running for over a minute, she's still far away. With Arcueid being the center of this world, it's as if space is expanding around her. Roa tries to explain it simply, comparing it to running on a conveyor belt going the wrong way. If he wants to close in, Shiki's gonna have to go faster than the fake world can expand. The closer he gets, however, the harsher the winds become, similar to the distortion Ciel faced earlier. At this point, Arcueid hasn't even noticed them, so going any further will make things far more dangerous. Shiki ignores Roa's warning in order to save Ciel. From this distance, Shiki can only see Arcueid as a shining ball of light, but getting closer reveals her astral body more clearly. The atmosphere grows more dense and hostile as he sprints forward faster than 50 kilometers per hour. Under a blood-red sky, he watches as Arcueid stands up. The fact that her form is only truly visible to those up close is akin to how people worship gods. Gods seem incomprehensibly scary from afar, yet more beautiful the closer you get to them. Arcueid's luminous body easily exceeds the height of the city's tallest building, the Hyatt Tower. This reminds Shiki of a childhood fairy tale, in which humans are lost and powerless within a giant's garden. For a closer look, he removes his glasses, hoping to find death lines. While the city has them, Arcueid herself does not. Instead, he spots Ciel being clenched between Arcueid's fingers. Before he can fully process this situation, Roa warns of more sharp winds coming from both sides. Shiki dodges them quickly, grateful to have a voice in his head. The currents lash out about every 5 seconds. Even though Arcueid doesn't notice him, the very atmosphere around her rejects invaders with the wind lashing out like claws. She only looks to be 300 meters away, but due to the spatial distortion, she's at least 10 times further. Even worse, Shiki will have to travel atop buildings, avoiding the more turbulent winds below. With his vampire body, he can jump about 20 meters high in a single bound, but Roa warns that depending on this body will make it harder for him to return to normal. Even if Roa's soul is killed, there's a chance Shiki's body will remain this way. Still, saving Ciel comes first. With ease, Shiki leaps up and across the buildings without hesitation. Even above ground, the winds are strong enough to blow him away if he plans his jumps wrong. It's still safer than the surface, however. As for Arcueid herself, Roa recommends approaching her from behind. Even as a luminous being, her eyes have the power to paralyze Shiki if she notices him. Luckily, Arcueid lacks mobility in this form, so flanking her shouldn't be an issue. Agreeing to this plan, Shiki dashes to the side, traveling the buildings along a circular path. When gusts of wind do attack, he's able to slice through them with his knife. It's an advantage that Arcueid's hatred for Ciel is so deep that she hasn't noticed them approaching. Arcueid is busy tormenting her prey. Arcueid takes pleasure from snapping Ciel's joints and licking the blood from them as they tremble. She twists Ciel's torso, dyeing her fingernails a fresh red. She rips Ciel's head off, watching it retract like a drawstring. Lastly, she rips into Ciel's belly, squishing the exposed organs around in her massive fingers. Recalling Ciel's remark about squashing her like a bug, Arcueid repays the sentiment, crushing her victim until the reactions start to bore her. The violent splatters are loud enough to reach Shiki's ears, and to try and stop Arcueid, he screams out in anger. He runs in futility, trying to close the gap while slicing through more wind claws. Not so much as reacting to his efforts, Arcueid instead celebrates, calling Ciel a wonderful doll. A more powerful tornado draws Shiki in from behind, forcing him to continue approaching her back. Even if he makes it, though, it's not like he can see death lines. Regardless, he needs a new vantage point. He continues circling Arcueid while evading her automatic winds. All the while, she mocks Shiki by asking Ciel what's so great about him. If he's come to save Ciel, then where is he? Arcueid lists off his faults, that he's crude, loud, insincere, unfaithful, and a cowardly murderer. It becomes clear she's already well aware of Shiki, pretending not to notice in order to antagonize him. She even allows him to get within 10 meters, a decent perspective from which to watch Ciel get further brutalized. Seeing his lover get dismembered in front of him, Shiki snaps, throwing caution to the wind. With a defiant leap, he lands on Arcueid's arm and stabs into it as an anchor. He hoped the impact would force Arcueid to unhand Ciel, but his pathetic attempt proves less effective than an ant bite. Writing it off as a failure, Shiki moves further down the arm to confront Ciel at the hand. He apologizes for not being here sooner, but Ciel, barely conscious, simply begs him to run away. He plans to, but not empty-handed. Despite having no death lines, Shiki stabs into Arcueid's finger. An assault that should penetrate steel does absolutely nothing to her. Even so, he desperately stabs into her finger again and again, angry that his efforts aren't having an effect. In agony, Ciel declares fighting Arcueid in this form is useless, continuing to beg for him to escape. Arcueid finally acknowledges his presence, using her eyes to freeze him on the spot. He's unable to resist as the winds around her grow stronger. She treats him like an insect, or perhaps even a crumb. Blowing him off her body is a nuisance. Unable to react, Shiki flies away like a dry leaf, helplessly plummeting to the hostile ground below. As exhausted as he is, he yearns to keep fighting, right before his body crashes onto the city streets. Surprisingly, the impact is reasonably soft. Instead of pavement, Shiki has landed on the vast greenery blooming from beneath Arcueid's feet. Proceeding deeper, he discovers the city completely overrun by large, healthy vines. More specifically, while these vines are as thick as entire trees, they're actually a network of roots. The oxygen density is dangerously thick within this ancient forest. It's how nature was long before humans arrived, only now propagated to compete with the man-made architecture surrounding it. Feeling even more powerless, Shiki listens as Arcueid's distant voice taunts him for being so small. Despite this intimidation, the more Arcueid hurts Ciel, the stronger Shiki's resolve becomes. Arcueid may seem invincible, but there's gotta be a way to kill her. First, though, he needs to hide again, so he runs deeper into the forest. Arcueid admits it's an interesting strategy, but comments that he shouldn't be able to breathe that far in. Normally, this wouldn't be a problem for full-on vampires, but Shiki's still clinging to his humanity, rendering the forest too hot and humid to reside in for much longer. With limited time to spare, Shiki continues deeper, scanning the area for death lines. His body is failing him, but he ignores Roa's warnings because he suspects his target is close. Thankfully, he succeeded at vanishing from Arcueid's vision, leaving her alone for a moment of introspection. Like before, she's still struggling between conflicting emotions of joy and sorrow. Part of her heart regrets what has happened, but even if she wanted to stop, she can't. She doesn't even know how, or if that's possible. While she waits for Shiki to return, she continues to torture Ciel. It makes sense Ciel's body won't die, but it's surprising that her rationality has also endured all this pain. The poor girl yearns to die as a human, but since Arcueid plans on absorbing Roa or making Shiki her servant, that wish will never come true. Should Arcueid win, Ciel will be her morbid plaything forever. In absolute agony, Ciel strains just to give brief responses, resigned to this pain to protect Shiki. Even so, her attitude still remains. Defiantly, she says Arcueid still doesn't understand Shiki, even after being killed by him. This obviously invokes Arcueid's wrath, and further torment ensues. Within the forest, Shiki can hear this altercation, at least Arcueid's part of it. For every wound she inflicts on Ciel, his anger and determination surges. In a hurry, he follows the death lines to what he hopes is a point of convergence. Roa again warns he's pushing himself past his humanity, but there's no room for hesitation. Shiki widens his eyes for the best view possible of his target. It's enough effort that Arcueid can sense his determination, which she considers a suicidal feat, until realizing Shiki has an actual strategy. She herself might not have any death lines, but as a nature spirit, her power is tied to the planets. All Shiki needs to do to weaken her is kill a part of nature. In this case, a massive death point uncovered within the forest. She can practically read his mind, so he's remained as vague as possible to hide his intentions. With just a moment of lag time between them, he dives for the death point, ready to weaken her with a single strike. As soon as she figures this out, however, she pulls the death point out from beneath him, choosing to use event storage a second time, now with her luminous body. Her strength is so tremendous that she can store not just the roots and city, but the entire texture of the planet's reality. Like before, a massive vortex beneath her begins to swallow all of her surroundings. To avoid getting sucked in himself, Shiki leaps up onto the buildings and debris to gain some distance. Arcueid is pissed he nearly severed that death line, and vows she's going to get serious. Between avoiding torrential claws and slipstreams, Shiki desperately tries to flee as the whole world pulls him back. Jumping between objects proves too cumbersome to maintain, so Roa borrows the nerves in Shiki's left hand to open a magic circuit and casts an attraction spell. Like gravity, there's now a force that can pull Shiki away from the vortex. So instead of jumping, he only has to fall toward his destination. Isn't there already a game based on this exact idea? If he uses it too much, though, the circuit made from his left hand will burn, and Roa will have to just borrow his foot after that. Shiki doesn't want to use it, but even his top running speed is only fast enough to maintain his distance as the vortex pulls him in. To actually gain distance, he'll need to go faster. After getting hit and losing some ground, he realizes his body needs to rest, so he puts all of his effort into a mad dash to escape Arcueid's gravitational field. Completely exhausting himself, he reaches a safe distance before collapsing. Noticing this, Arcueid brags that this means she actually does understand Shiki. Too bad Ciel isn't paying attention. Since the last time dying, Ciel's body has recovered, but her mind has yet to return. Figuring Shiki can't even take one more step, Arcueid decides to drop Ciel, discarding her like a piece of trash. Ciel falls from a height of 80 meters, destined to be swallowed up by the whirlpool below, with no one to save her. Arcueid is absolutely shocked then, as Shiki reacts to this by ignoring his prior fatigue. As if fueled by the power of love, he charges the falling Ciel and makes a dramatic leap to take hold of her. Just as he's about to make it, though, Arcueid takes matters into her own hands. She ceases the gravity on Ciel, stopping her fall, while pushing him away with a gust of wind. To stabilize himself, Shiki uses attraction, landing safely on a nearby building. With a flick of her fingers, Arcueid launches Ciel across the sky like an arrow. Accidentally, Ciel's body lands in the only place unaffected by the event storage, the school. At first, Shiki thinks this is a chance to reach Ciel, since, according to Roa, Arcueid's luminous body can't move forward from that spot. Completely defying that expectation, however, Arcueid says she needs to pick up her litter and begins slowly walking toward the school. Her selfishness defies the very limitations imposed upon her. The majesty of her walking across the destroyed city is godlike. Shiki looks at this catastrophe and wonders what to do. This may be his only chance to reach Ciel, but Roa tells him to just sit and wait. By choosing to walk, Arcueid has truly abandoned her role as an avatar of the planet. She could only handle the luminous body with the planet's blessing, but by herself, it's too much power to contain. As such, she'll soon self-destruct. In that regard, they've already won, confirmed by the black core in Arcueid's chest. It'll be a fitting end for her life of over 1,000 years. Recalling their past, though, Shiki decides that's not acceptable. It's not fair, and he doesn't want to see their positive journey together end on such a bitter note. Like the two-timing softy he is, Shiki asks Roa if the self-destruct can be stopped. The way he sees it, he's been fighting to save Ciel, not to kill Arcueid. Even after all of this, he still wants an ending where both girls can be happy. Roa finds it absurd, but explains that Arcueid's destruction can be stopped if Shiki kills the luminous body beforehand. Thinking back to Ciel's earlier fight, when she used Calvaria Galgalim, Shiki devises a plan. Roa, however, refuses to help, having nothing to gain from doing so. Why take the risk if Arcueid's already going to die? Cleverly, though, Shiki asks if Roa would be okay letting Arcueid die, having never considered him a worthy opponent. Being honest, Roa admits it would be humiliating, which is all it takes to convince him to help. Roa asks Shiki to wait 10 seconds for his body to recover. During that time, Shiki calculates what he needs to do to reach Arcueid. He also considers if this is worth risking his life for, but when time is up, he starts his pursuit regardless. Turns out, heading towards Arcueid is a lot easier than escaping her. He flies forward, riding on debris while cutting his way even closer. That said, her retaliatory claws are larger and more aggressive. To bypass these claws, he relies on attraction magecraft, drawing himself to different buildings as anchor points. Stubbornly, Arcueid herself refuses to acknowledge his efforts as he zips across footholds like a bolt of lightning. Shiki's target isn't Arcueid herself, but rather something Ciel failed to utilize. When she cast Calvaria Galgalim, she drew upon more energy than was necessary to form her massive guillotine of light. Roa says it's because she's inefficient, not cut out for precise work. As a result, one of the spell's stars is still burning in the stratosphere. Using it, Shiki can sever the luminous body's neck, but to do so, he needs to reach a relay point 400 meters above her. At this point, Roa activates Calvaria's star, burning away his entire being to allow Shiki to grab and direct it. Like Kirby in Smash Bros., Shiki clings to the star, flying in all directions as his nerves fray. Asking him to control its trajectory is ridiculous. The difference in power is far too great, like trying to steer a rampaging bull with only a chopstick. Roa truly did sacrifice himself, unable to help Shiki with this last critical step. Without much choice, he fights with the star until learning how to essentially ride it. By going with its flow like a torrent of water, Shiki is able to aim the star straight down at Arcueid. The closer he gets, the more he sees her inner beauty, recalling his emotions for her. To set her free, he unleashes the star, and it crashes directly through her from head to toe, blowing the luminous body apart. This is only the first step, as destroying the body forms what's called a retrograde canal, a vortex of sorts that leads back to the origin of the world. The light of her body gathers into a single area, birthing a shape called the celestial egg. Shiki can tell from memories that this was what Roa desperately sought in order to attain eternity, the chance to trace back and acquire knowledge of the universe right from its onset. Shiki looks on in awe, descending into the canal like Dave at the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey. He experiences a psychedelic thrill ride through the universe that far exceeds his comprehension. As astonishing as this is, Shiki only has one target at its core. He has to strike the heart of this luminous body, but can only do so while falling past it. The core has no death lines, but thankfully he doesn't have to kill it. As a perfect entity, he only needs to scratch it to destroy its value. At the critical moment, Shiki stabs his knife into the core, tracing along its spherical form as he falls. Tearing through, he emerges on the other side, causing the body to disperse and flood the world with its light. Event storage ends, returning the world to its original shape. Shiki lands on the ground and looks beyond the fog to find his school. Needless to say, his body's all kinds of fucked, and he's lucky to hang on to his consciousness. Even though Roa was the one to essentially cause this entire mess, Shiki feels oddly indebted to him, kinda sad he's gone. The only reason Shiki was able to cut the core was that the strike earlier literally included Roa, a part of Arcueid, alongside Calvaria's star. The vampire who spent hundreds of years fawning over a single obsession was willing to give it up in the end. Shiki reflects on this as Arcueid, returned to her normal body, approaches him through the fog. Despite being saved, Arcueid acts like the fight isn't over yet. Shiki retorts that of course it's over, and he won. Stubbornly, she states that she's still raring to go, trying to hide just how weak she is. Given all the death lines on her body, it's clear as day she's in no condition to fight. Despite this, she insists on making excuses. Called out as a liar, she pouts, and their argument devolves into insults. Shiki says he can't forgive her, but he'll listen to an apology if she has one. Even so, he's obviously happy, unable to restrain a wide grin as she continues her childish fit. This just evolves even further into a baka fest. Eventually, Shiki apologizes, admitting he could have had a lot of fun staying with her, but in the end, he's chosen happiness with Ciel. That's right, all of this was basically an apocalyptic breakup. Right on cue, Ciel comes running to find them sitting on the school's field. What seems like a hostile gathering quickly diffuses. With Roa gone, there's no reason for them to fight. Arcueid's hatred seems to have completely vanished. Instead, she declares she's tired and will be heading home. In disbelief, Ciel stutters in confusion, wondering why she's suddenly given up. Turning away, Arcueid declares she doesn't care about Shiki anymore. He's a jerk. As such, Ciel can have him, assuming she takes good care of him. Smiling, Arcueid disappears into the night. Shiki's tattered body finally collapses, causing Ciel to call out to him in tears. Despite feeling relief, he can't even manage the breath to dispel her worries. Thus, she cries as he loses consciousness, proud of what he's been able to achieve. Just like in the normal ending, Shiki has a dream of meeting Roa as a priest in the plaza, but their conversation goes a bit differently. After talking about the gorgeous weather, Shiki asks the priest why he reincarnated. The priest says it was to keep pushing the endless limit of human perception and potential. He brings up a sister in the burial agency who gained a higher level of existence by becoming a demon. However, reaching this demonic form ironically made her more aware of her own limitations. As for himself, he wanted to know everything about the universe, desiring a way to observe it until the end of the world. If the universe is always expanding, though, would such a thing be possible? The priest believes humans can achieve it, because otherwise, why else would they have intelligence? a cold wind blows through the area, prompting Shiki to start heading home. The priest says his journey has ended, and he regrets not getting the chance to be Shiki's enemy. Considering Shiki was the only one capable of truly killing him, it's a shame he never had murderous intent. That said, the priest remarks that while he wasn't capable of being Shiki's enemy, Shiki himself can be his own worst enemy. The priest sets the book he was reading down on the bench, allowing its pages to scatter in the wind. Next, it appears that Shiki is at the hospital. Akiha, Kohaku, Satsuki, and even Arihiko come for a visit, all hoping Shiki can recover. His schoolmates and family at home meet and mingle, seemingly getting along. Eventually, though, it's time for them to depart. Everyone leaves, one at a time, with Akiha being the last. Her grief and worry are apparent. Jarringly, Shiki wakes up, not at the hospital, but in his own bed at the Tono mansion. It's a pleasant morning, but after he puts his glasses on, he notices that it's 9 a.m. He's late for school. To immediately calm his panic, Hisui has been sitting right beside him and explains that today is a holiday, so he has the day off. She remarks that he appears to be in good health. Even so, sleeping till 9 is a bit extreme, but he can't recall the previous night. Hisui explains that he was busy helping with household errands and went to sleep around 1 a.m. They have guests coming, after all. Apparently, Akiha has decided to spend the day with him. It's unusual behavior for her, but Hisui thinks it's a reaction to how avoidant and careless he's been lately. Understanding, Shiki promises to be more attentive to his home life and vows to learn more about Hisui. With a blush, Hisui says she looks forward to earning his trust. As she leaves him to get dressed, he feels something is off about today. When Shiki heads down the stairs to the lobby, he hears voices of his past, playful exchanges from his childhood. He spots a mirage of his younger self, a young boy clad in traditional clothes. Kohaku steps into the lobby and greets Shiki. It's alarming because, last he saw her, he tried to kill her. He brings up yesterday, but her account is the same as Hisui's, that he helped her planning food for today's festivities, escorting her while shopping for sweets. Going with the flow, Shiki tries to say that he prefers the ordinary sweets she already makes at home, but she praises how amazingly colorful the cakes and candies were at the large store they went to. Totally excited, she shows off one of the individually wrapped butter cakes they brought home, only to discover by reading the label that they're 8,000 calories per serving and cost 500 yen apiece. Putting that aside, Shiki asks about the little boy he just saw, but she has no idea what he's talking about. Again, shrugging it off, he heads to the dining room for breakfast. He goes the wrong way, though, reaching for the front door. Kohaku reminds him where the dining room is, and he wonders why he felt the need to go somewhere else. At the dinner table, Akiha thanks Shiki for helping him with accounting last night. She lured him in, asking him to help her study, but wound up making him learn how to run the family's business. She looks forward to his graduation so that he can share some of that burden. Thinking of the future, though, he realizes that can't happen, but doesn't know why. Something's not right, and the look on his face worries her. Flashes of the hospital enter his mind, but he chooses to ignore any uncomfortable truths. Instead, he suggests they go out and enjoy the holiday together, apparently forgetting they already planned a party at home for his birthday. Say what? His friends are planning to attend. Arihiko's one thing, but Akiha looks forward to evaluating what kind of person Satsuki is. Soon enough, Arihiko and Satsuki arrive. Hisui welcomes them in, and after some tea in the sitting room, they're taken to the outside terrace. As one would expect, Arihiko is blown away by how luxurious and large everything is. He's just as impressed with Akiha's beauty, unable to believe someone could look so amazing without makeup. He imagines she'll be even more of a knockout at the age of 20. Akiha's too busy interviewing Satsuki as a potential rival. Under pressure, Satsuki reveals that she's known Shiki since junior high, and he'd come to visit her while she was working at a family restaurant. Of course, Akiha inquires why her brother would go to such a place without a reason, determined to find some kind of foul play. Luckily, this is interrupted when Hisui and Kohaku bring out tea and snacks. On the tray is the butter cake from earlier. While it's an import product, it's also cheap and low quality, like a knockoff. But to someone like Kohaku, it seems like a rare treasure. Kohaku interprets Satsuki and Arihiko gazing at the cake as a sign of fascination, so she begins to brag about it being an amazing product from the other side of the earth. She tries to describe it, but it turns out she can't read the packaging because it's in Russian. Satsuki plays along, but Arihiko is thrilled that Shiki's maids are so traditionally Japanese and naive. Sometimes it's nice to be old-fashioned. The party continues pleasantly until the sky suddenly grows dark and cloudy. They take this as a great opportunity to see the rest of the mansion's interior. As Hisui takes the two guests to the sitting room, Shiki just watches from a rocking chair. They express how lovely his family is before heading in. Akiha stays behind with Shiki, asking him why he looks so sad. Isn't he having fun? Certainly he is, but he knows it's wrong because Ciel isn't there. Acknowledging this fake world loses color and screeches to a halt. Calmly, he tells Akiha to leave so he can return to where he belongs. In opposition, she tells him to stay at the mansion where he can be happy, because on the outside, he's already dead. Nani? If that's true though, why isn't Ciel part of this dream? Sadly, Akiha, Hisui, and Kohaku all state that so long as he's with Ciel, the mansion cannot accept him. It's a different reality than what he actually chose, so this fantasy is incompatible with Ciel. Being with her means accepting his death. That said, as warm and happy as this dream is, he can't stay. He made a promise to be with Ciel, no matter how grim the outcome. As he denies the dream, it recedes into total darkness. Akiha is amazed yet saddened by his decision, and she too fades to black. Despite this, Shiki refuses to let his consciousness die. In the dark, his childhood self asks him why he rejected the dream. He could have endured without a care, but now he'll just return to his motionless corpse. It's not Rose doing either, he's just dead, effectively anyway. In reality, his body is still in the hospital, and if he stops the dream, he'll just remain in a coma where he won't even be able to do that anymore. The young boy continues to entice him to re-enter the dream. This voice is the consciousness and memories that were discarded 8 years ago, his Nanaya self. Shiki is encountering him because both of their wills have fallen to the same level. Without a good reason, Shiki's better off at least enjoying himself in a dream rather than rotting in a bed. This way, both the current Shiki and his discarded younger self can be happy, dreaming their own respective dreams. Heck, the child Shiki's dreams aren't even as immersive, relying on fewer memories from his earlier life. But even so, he would prefer a simple dream to nothing at all. Plus, if they try hard enough, they might even be able to share each other's dreams. Ultimately, Shiki does have a reason to wake up. Ciel is that reason, and after promising not to leave her alone, he wants to do whatever he can to fulfill that promise, even if it's futile. Understanding this, child Shiki says goodbye, thanking him for the pleasant dreams while they lasted. It'll be the last time these two consciousnesses ever meet. Despite all this fuss over dying, Shiki can feel his head resting on something soft. Opening his eyes, he sees his beloved looking down on him, her eyes moist with tears. The morning has come, and he's somehow still alive. He reaches out a hand to touch her cheek, exchanging smiles before words. The burns he received from literally hugging a star have mostly healed, meaning that even without Roa's will, his body is still partially a vampire. Ciel asks if he can understand her, and he complies by pointing out that she's finally smiling, even while crying. It's a precious moment. He's glad he kept his promise, but Ciel happens to recall a slightly different promise. The two of them still have to visit a restaurant in the city with Arihiko after all. Shiki tries to raise his head off her lap, but is still too hurt to move on his own just yet. He'll be ready in another hour, so embarrassingly, she asks him to stay resting on her. He doesn't want to be a burden, but she admits she likes it, and is actually waiting for yet another part of their promise, the kiss. Quietly bowing her head, she touches her lips to his, kissing for the second time. This single moment feels like an hour, and when they separate, they tell each other good morning. Bathed in euphoria, he decides to fall asleep for just a little longer, asking her to put him in some shade until classes start. Seriously? Guys half dead and he still wants to attend class. Ciel suggests they play hooky and go back to her apartment. She picks him up, bridal style, and when he protests, she claims she needs to take him home and ask him what he was doing with Arcueid last night. Plus, since his vampire body isn't returning to normal, they'll have to look into that. Ciel leaps off the ground, high into the air above the school. She carries him across the city by bouncing off the rooftops, proving that her skills weren't just from her immortal body. Shiki is reminded of how he's fallen for a truly remarkable woman. As they soar across the city, Shiki decides he really wants Ciel to call him by his first name, and not just Tono-kun like she's been doing all this time. To sweeten the deal, he says he'll love her even more if she does. Her face turns red as flames, stopping on top of a random house. Stuttering, she says it should be easy, or at least she wishes it were. Adorably, she takes a deep breath, accepting a task more intense than fighting vampires. She gives it her all, but can only repeat the first character, she, over and over. Impatient, he interrupts her with a passionate kiss, glad to see that horrible night has turned into a brilliant dawn. The two still have issues to face. Ciel's still going to be an executor for the church, which is odd given that Shiki's still part vampire. Who knows, they may even run into a certain blonde adversary. They've definitely got troubles ahead, but nothing they can't solve together. At this point, the credits kick in, playing an absolutely badass song called Believer by Renoa. I can't possibly post it here because of copyright bullshit, but perhaps you can treat that as a reward for playing the game yourself, now that you know what's actually happening in the story. Obviously, a full English translation would be ideal, and I can understand if you're reluctant to support a Japanese-only release. I sure was. After the credits, Ciel-sensei notes this is a happy end without anything to complain about. Neko Arc, however, is enraged that, once again, Arcueid loses the fight and has nothing to show for it, except for screen time. While Arc throws a kitty tantrum, Ciel reasons that it took both of them to provide the audience with such a spectacle. She even admits Arcueid's luminous body was kind of cute, and it was possible to relate to both sides of the conflict. This gets Neko Arc to back down and act bashful. This was the novel's grand finale, but unless you get each and every bad ending in the game, you're still missing out on a little bonus. Perhaps you already know this, but the completion bonus is actually a promo video announcing the production of Tsukihime, The Other Side of Red Garden, a sequel set to feature all the original game's Far Side routes, as well as the heavily coveted Satsuki route that never made it to the final game. So yeah, Nasu's given us all the goods. It's just taking a bit longer than we first expected. Honestly, I'm looking forward to a break from these. It's hard work, and I'll only dare to try this with the sequel if these videos gain a lot of views and remain safe from copyright claims. I have to adapt to the online climate, and there's no telling quite what the future holds. What I can do right now, though, is give a shout out to Petrico on Beast's Lair for providing a solid summary of the game's events. It helped me avoid getting lost in all the clutter, since Japanese is a very context-heavy language. In fact, this entire series would have been impossible, if not for the collaborative efforts of fans, each doing their part to make this game more accessible outside of Japan. That said, I want to wrap up this series by giving my impressions. Overall, I'm very pleased. I still wish Arcueid got an expanded ending, but that's what a potential Tsukihime 2 might be for, right? All the new stuff they added was exciting, but some of those new elements still remain quite a mystery. We hardly know jack about the Psyche family, but I'm certain they'll get more development in the sequel. I'm sure Dr. Araku will get more screen time as well. Just what does she want from all of this? Is she herself a dead apostle? Or at the very least, why does she associate with them? The only person who learned the truth about her was Noelle, and she died, allowing one of the most ominous characters to get away scot-free. Mario and his goons were an interesting addition. I kinda wish parts of his story were better developed, though, such as how he survived Arcueid's attack. I hear Nero Chaos is making an appearance in FGO, which might be our point of entry for understanding this new list of Dead Apostle ancestors and their associated idea bloods. I kinda doubt we'll get much of that from the Far Side routes. Either way, I'm really looking forward to those. Be sure to stay active with my channel, as I imagine one of the next things I'll be covering is Hollow Moon's English translation of Mahotsukai no Yoru. I hope you look forward to it. Before I go ahead and roll the credits, I want to give a special shout out to my $10 supporters. Video Gamer 75, Stephen Elak, Otaku Mom, Jens Ballman, Mystic Samurai 1983, Free Brick, RNG or Shuffles 1498, Crod, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Nigel, Happy, Sakura-chan, Caitlin P, and SF Giants fan Mike. Thank you all so much. Thanks for watching.
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to Otaku Daikun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of our anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content.
You can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or our YouTube membership. all of which come with benefits like exclusive vids and early access.
As always,
Celebrate your fandom.